So, Safta, what inspired you to write your memoir?
Well, I'm getting older, and though I've been speaking for years and years, I felt that I needed something that's going to last because I am one of the last survivors. And unless we tell the story, our speeches may be forgotten, but books are more eternal. And when I got the right opportunity with my co-writer, it was just perfect to write it. And especially, I'm very grateful to be able to write it so that children can read it and learn something and benefit by it.
Do you feel a sense of responsibility as the girl who lived to tell her story?
I feel an enormous responsibility. You know, um, I don't feel guilt. I didn't do anything to survive, but I do feel responsibility. And my responsibility is not to forget of those 1.5 million children who were gassed, who were starved to death, who were shot, who were drowned. Any way a person can be killed, those little children were killed for no reason. Innocent babies, just because they were born Jewish. I don't want to forget them. 1.5 million children, most of them went up in smoke. So that's another terrific responsibility. And another thing is sometimes people will say it didn't happen. Well, I am a witness. And this is why one of the reasons that Hitler wanted to kill the children, they he didn't want any witnesses. He was afraid exactly of a person like me. I will survive and I will tell the world. And I have every proof. My tattoo is my proof also that it happened. So that I am a witness and I don't want to forget those innocent adults and children who were murdered. And I want the world to sort of be careful, be aware that this can happen unless we stop the hatred towards each other and fighting. And we need to be aware of what prejudice can do to humanity.
What is your first memory as a child?
My first memory of a child of when I was in the ghetto under the table. And my biggest memory was when they took my grandmother and shot her just outside our house because she was elderly and useless. And because I was told without without any uncertainty, you have to be quiet, you have to be invisible, you cannot be seen, and you cannot be heard because that meant danger to me. So that's my first memory of being under the table.
Um, what do you remember about your family's life before?
Well, I don't have any memories of my family before the Holocaust. I was born when the Holocaust broke out. I was 1 year old, but I know stories. And my parents lived in a beautiful city in Danzig, big international city. My father just started a business that he was going to grow and was very proud of. My mother's, he had 8 brothers and sisters. My mother's family, gigantic Jewish family with a lot of rabbis. There were close to 150 people. She had 9 brothers and sisters. They were all married. She was the youngest, and they had a lot of children. And from what my mother told me after the war, they were very close. All the holidays were together, that they lived a life that they have chosen and were very happy in it. And when Hitler came, without any regards for anything, he just destroyed it.
How do you cope emotionally with your experiences at Auschwitz, and what kept you going?
Well, in the beginning, after the war, I never knew what it was. Why Jews were being killed. I didn't know why, and I didn't know what it was to be a Jew, since we never practiced anything. So I began to study Judaism, what it was, what made us Jewish rather than something else. And that was fabulous for me because I fell in love with the ideas, not all of them, but most of the ideas. And after that, of course, I got married, and it was fabulous. I had a wonderful. I married my childhood sweetheart. I had four just great children. What kept me going is moving from one stage to the other, and each one was very, very positive. I had fabulous eight grandchildren, so that the terrible things were a little bit wiped out with the positive things, and then talking about it, talking and sort of being a witness to the world. That's what kept me moving from stage to stage, from stage to stage.
Did you encounter anyone who tried to help you and your family?
It's no, I don't remember anything except one thing. When I was given the number, I was about 5 years old, five and a half. And I remember the woman, who was a young woman, she must have been 18. She, I watched her very carefully as she put the needle into ink and stuck a little dot in my hand, and her hand was shaking. And I said to myself, this lady doesn't like what she's doing. And after she finished, she helped me remember the number because I couldn't read or write, or and because she knew if I didn't answer to where they called my number, I'll be punished, or even maybe worse. So she helped me with that, and then she gave me a rag, and she told me to put it in water in order uh, to keep it to press it very hard so it should not swell. She was kind. So my interesting that my tattooing was not a terrible experience because of this one woman who tattooed 50, 60 children, and then she was killed because she was useless.
What was it like when Auschwitz was eventually liberated?
Well, it first of all, it felt like a dream. Liberation was was almost a fantasy. Like it couldn't happen, and it did because it happened in a very short time. The Germans left with 50,000 people that they forced to walk, and most of those people died, and there was nobody, no German in the camp. But and then within a day or so, the Russians came, and uh, it's hard to explain the enormous joy. People cried, people kissed their feet, they kissed their boots, they kissed their hands, and the Russian was so warm and so loving. One soldier picked me up and threw me in the air. I was by then 6.5 years old, and I looked at my mother and she smiled. I knew I was safe. It was fabulous.
What was the hardest thing about coming to New York City after the war?
Well, the hardest thing, first, the language. I couldn't communicate with anybody, and I thought I never be able to. And then my mother, who was then becoming even then depressed, when she realized that she left Poland without ever having experienced her family of 150 people, and she was very sick physically and emotionally because crossing that ocean, she was leaving all her family behind who have been killed. That was very, very difficult. And then, of course, the adjustment. Um, I looked differently. I was poor, very, very poor. Uh, had the wrong clothing, the wrong name, the wrong hairdo. All that I was going to change somehow. But the first year, until I learned to read, it was a very lonely, unhappy time. And one of the, in order to fit in, since I really did not fit in, my teacher suggested that I cut my hair, which I did, cover up my number and never talk about it, which I did. But then he changed my name from Tola to Susan to be more American. I had trouble remembering it, and I got my old name, my name back. But it was a very hard year, and I was very, very lonely.
This is fitting. Why did you change your name from Tola to Tova?
Oh, I changed my name from Tola to Tova. I never changed it legally, but when my husband, and my two children, um, Gadi and Risa, we immigrated to Israel. I really wanted to feel more Jewish. Polish, my Polish name has very bad memories. The Polish people did not accept our return. They were very mean, and we had a very hard 3 years in Poland after the war. And I just didn't want to associate with that name anymore. But it's still my legal name, where all my friends know me as Tova. But I had other names in between. I tried out different names. This one fitted me best.
What reactions have you had to your story?
Now, I had most of the reaction to my story were excellent. People listened, adults, children, schools have been absolutely wonderful. I speak to 12-year-olds, 13 years old, 18-year-olds, and colleges. Very good reaction. My grandson, Aaron, put me on TikTok, and I asked him not to show me any of the anti Semitic reactions, but apparently they've been a lot. And many of them he told me about. I I didn't hear most of them. That they say that I made up the story. That I too bad more Jews weren't killed. Why did I survive? There's some very terrible comments, but I would say that on the whole, the reaction is much more positive than negative.
What do you hope children and young adults can take away from your book?
There are a number of things.
Repeat.
Both adults and the people who read my book, both adults and children, first I want them to stop and think of what can happen. You have to be aware of your influence and of your environment. And if you can influence your environment for the good, for better, so much, if everybody were to do it a little bit at a time, the world would be a better place. And especially the children, that our future lies with them. If they can be aware of what prejudice and meanness and fear of the other, or of somebody they don't know, who looks in a different way, speaks a different language, has different religious beliefs, if they would drop the fear against people like that, the fear of others who are not like we are, I think maybe we can somehow never get to the point what Hitler did, where he wanted to get rid of all of us because of our religion. Um, I hope the young readers will get that, and they'll get inspired to be more aware, and I guess we call it upstanding, to be there, to stand up in their environment, whatever they do. And another thing, I want them to leave the feeling of hope that no matter how tough things are, somehow we are resilient. We'll get out of this, we'll move on. We will not only survive, but we will thrive. Like I did, really. And like many, many, many refugees did and still do.